Hey everyone. The South Carolina Department of Education and Prager University have partnered to recommend Prager material in South Carolina classrooms. Today we'll be taking a look at the actual material Prager themselves says aligns with South Carolina school standards for students K through 8th grade. PragerU is a nonprofit media organization, not an academic institution. For more on their founding, background, and operations, check out the video below. In a 67-page document made available on the PragerU website, the nonprofit outlined each piece of its content they feel aligns with South Carolina's school standards for K through 8th grade. This is the exact material teachers are able to use in South Carolina classrooms right now. We'll be taking a look at 3 PragerU series outlined in the document: Otto's Tales, Leo and Layla, and 5-minute videos. Otto's Tales is described by PragerU as a, quote, sweet storytime show that celebrates American values. It usually features host Jill Simonian reading from a storybook, accompanied visually by animated depictions of the tale she reads along with Otto the Bulldog, mascot of the show. An animated Dennis Prager also regularly features in the show. The series features as recommended material for kindergarten through 3rd grade. Otto's Tales features depictions of historical figures like Harriet Tubman and Abraham Lincoln. Their tales distilled into easy-to-digest short stories, often followed by a brief summary of takeaways offered up by Simonian. Folk tales and fables are a staple of the series as well, like The Ugly Duckling, The Lion and the Mouse, and Chicken Little. We found the stories depicted in Otto's Tales are largely apolitical, though the ascribed takeaways tacked on the end can be narrow and limited, given the many possible interpretations of the stories, especially the fables and folk tales. Leo and Layla is a PragerU cartoon for elementary and middle schoolers that follows 2 kids traveling through time to meet historical figures. Notable figures covered include U.S. Presidents Ronald Reagan, Teddy Roosevelt, and George Washington, and American innovators like Thomas Edison and the Wright brothers, who feature alongside figures from Abrahamic religious tradition, like Abraham, Moses, and David. PragerU highlights Leo and Layla Meet Moses as material relevant to helping students investigate and explain the economic, social, political, and environmental motivations behind human migration for 3rd graders studying world geography. Leo and Layla isn't afraid to lean into historical inaccuracies, lack of context, or oversimplification. One example is an episode about Frederick Douglass, considered incredibly radical in his time, featuring Douglass telling the kids to stay away from radicals.
But if they are radicals like Garrison, you and your brother will be best served to stay away.
In the video, Douglass also states,
there was no real movement anywhere in the world to abolish slavery before the American founding.
The abolition of slavery worldwide has taken many forms over the centuries, but this statement is categorically false. Some scholars say slavery was abolished in the Philippines as early as 1574. Others say Japan abolished slavery in 1590, though they continued to use prisoners of war in World War II as laborers, much like the United States does with many prisoners today. And some argue Russia effectively abolished slavery as early as 1723. This episode is recommended by PragerU for 4th graders. The 5-minute video series is PragerU's flagship program, and far and away the most politically charged. This series first pops up as recommended for 5th graders, but predominantly features for 8th graders. These videos include dozens of presenters. Those featured in videos recommended for South Carolina schools include John Yoo, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Brett Stevens, and many, many more. One video, presented by the head of the Department of History at the United States Military Academy at West Point and former Brigadier General, entitled, Was the Civil War About Slavery?, does state that slavery was the most important cause of the Civil War, citing many historical sources and deconstructing several different arguments that are still raised to this day. Another recommended 5-minute video is called, Would You Rather Be Colonized by Aztecs or Christians? PragerU says this video can help students examine the continuities and changes in the development of world trade networks and colonialism, yet it opens with Michael Knowles ascribing beliefs to an ambiguous left and mentions Judeo-Christian tradition as fact.
To put it another way, not since Adam in the Garden of Eden has any people sprouted out of the ground. And in the case of Adam, you might recall, he had a little help.
Another video recommended from this standard is Goodbye Columbus Day, presented by podcast host Steven Crowder. Crowder, adorned in a shirt with 2 handguns on it, has these things to say to students.
First person to cross the Atlantic from the continent of Europe, and he did so without any maps and only 3 small ships. If you can name them, by the way, comment below, as I'm sure your professor can't. Columbus is not the issue here and never was. This whole Indigenous Peoples Day charade is about teaching your children to despise Western civilization and anybody who dare defend it.
And here's what he has to say about the Wounded Knee Massacre.
That's a one-sided beatdown with Old Glory wielding a hammer.
In the video, Why the Road to Hell is Paved with Good Intentions, recommended to help 8th grade modern world history students learn about the installation of new governments during the Meiji Restoration and Russian and Chinese revolutions, Dennis Prager says,
"So too those who seek the elimination of hate speech. They have good intentions, even though in reality they constitute the first serious threat to free speech in American history."
The Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798 limited speech critical of the government, and the Espionage Act of 1917 and Sedition Act of 1918 limited speech critical of the U.S. military or involvement in World War I. This statement is a great example of one of the most pervasive problems we found researching PragerU's content, seemingly picking and choosing history to make hyperbolic, contemporary talking points. Breaking down complex historical, civic, and geopolitical issues into 5-minute increments is hard. Some of the topics PragerU covers largely developed over decades and centuries. To adequately distill that information into a minutes-long cartoon or 5-minute video for kids to comprehensively understand multifaceted issues and topics effectively is an unrealistic expectation and could never do justice to tell the full story of the topics at hand. A realistic expectation would be that supplemental or introductory material recommended for public school classrooms in South Carolina is there to do just that, supplement and introduce. We've found many examples of recommended PragerU content doing just that. Their content is not exclusively what many of their opponents say it is. However, when the company's figurehead and founder says things like this at a conference hosted by Moms for Liberty,
and all I heard was, well, because you indoctrinate kids. And which is true. We bring doctrines to children. That's a very fair statement.
It's not hard to see that vision coming to fruition through the pervasive amounts of rhetoric, hyperbole, and subjective viewpoints presented in many of the videos recommended for teachers and students in South Carolina. In the video announcing the partnership, Ellen Weaver had this to say.
I just want to say a huge thank you to your team and of course to the staff at the department for the incredibly hard work that goes into making sure that everything aligns with those standards. But because that hard work has been done, it's an easy resource for our teachers to pick up and to use with confidence. And so that's what we're really all about here in South Carolina, is equipping our teachers to do what they're called to do, which is to teach our students and to ensure that our students have access to the highest quality of supplemental resources and curriculum. And so this is a great step forward for our state, and I'm really grateful for your partnership.
Do you think the content PragerU is offering lives up to that standard? Comment below and let us know. And subscribe to ABC News 4 to stay tuned as we examine this partnership further.